Hey everyone, Ryan here from IKN. So in this video, we're going to go through a very simple exercise that we can use to improve thoracic rotation. But before we go into the actual exercise, we're going to briefly discuss some concepts surrounding the variability of the spine and why it's important to consider these when we're sequencing our interventions to improve thoracic rotation. Okay. Now the first one is maintaining the position of the pelvis. Okay. If we don't maintain the position of the pelvis as we rotate the spine, then we're not really getting any rotation of the spine at all. We're really just rotating about the femur, okay? So if I was to rotate my ribcage spine to the left, but the pelvis moves in the same direction, if you try that yourself, if I rotate my ribcage pelvis in the same direction, I'm not getting any rotation of the spine. I'm not getting any dissociation between the ribcage and the pelvis. I'm really just rotating about the femur, okay? So it's the pelvis moving over the femur. The femur stays fixed and the pelvis moves around the femur, okay? So that's why we need to maintain the position of the pelvis when we're rotating the spine, okay? A lot of people will talk about locking out or maintaining the position of the lumbar spine, but it's really about maintaining the position of the pelvis because you really can't separate lumbar rotation from thoracic rotation, okay? Second thing to consider here as well is, are we rotating the ribcage thoracic spine relative to the pelvis? Is that the intention? Or is the intention to rotate the ribcage and thoracic spine relative to the scapula and the upper limb segment? Okay, that's something to consider as well. Number three, the focus needs to be on improving variability across the spine. So for example, if we have a client who already has a very extended thoracic spine and has a limitation in both rotation of the thoracic spine and flexion, then we would be more inclined to improve flexion of the thoracic spine first before we rotate, because we're moving into a position of more variability. When your thoracic spine is very extended, then we have less variability within the spine. That's a closed pack position, okay? So if you were to extend your thoracic spine now and try and rotate your thoracic spine and your ribcage relative to the pelvis, you're going to find that you don't have a huge amount of range of motion. But if you slightly flex your ribcage and thoracic spine and then try and rotate your ribcage relative to your pelvis, you're going to find that you have a little bit more variability, okay? If we look at that within another case scenario, if we have a client who already has a very flexed ribcage and thoracic spine and is limited in extension and rotation, then we would be more inclined to rotate the thoracic spine first before we just drive them back into extension, okay? So that would be the key kind of, focus when it comes to, well, just one kind of variability concept to guide your thought process when you're trying to sequence your interventions. If someone already has a very extended thoracic spine, which is a representation of reduced variability within the spine, then we want to try and get a little bit more variability first within the spine before we rotate. We don't want to just rotate the thoracic spine and the rib cage within a spine that's already expressing less variability. And if we have a spine that's very flexed, the rib cage is very flexed, and they can't extend and they can't rotate, then we'd be likely to rotate them first before we move them towards a position of less variability. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to go through the exercise. Okay, so for this exercise, we're going to be in a seated position next to the wall. So if the wall is on the left-hand side, it means we're going to be working to rotate our spine to the left-hand side and vice versa for the right-hand side. We need to be able to maintain the position of the pelvis, and we're going to do that through a gentle squeeze of a block. So we're adducting the femurs to squeeze the block to maintain pelvic position. Because if we're rotating the spine to the wall here and we see that femur pull back, what that does or what that represents is a rotation of the pelvis towards the wall. So we're really not getting that ribcage, thoracic spine and pelvic dissociation. So we're going to squeeze the block between the knees, okay, to maintain the level of the femur. The position of your pelvis relative to the wall will dictate or influence how aggressive the rotation is. So the closer we are to the wall, the more of an aggressive rotation you're going to get through the thoracic spine. The further away you are from the wall, the less aggressive it's going to be, okay? What we're going to do if we're rotating to the left-hand side, we're going to put a right hand on the outside of the left knee. Our left hand is going to come behind. We want that left hand below the level of the left shoulder and slightly behind, so that we have the forearm generally parallel with the ground. We don't want it too high, we don't want it too low. Okay, so we're going to maintain that position there. Right hand on the outside of the left knee. And what this does is it allows us to generate this pull and push type maneuver to rotate the rib cage towards the wall. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull through my right hand, gently push through my left hand to try and turn my sternum towards the wall. Once I reach a barrier, then I'm going to take a gentle breath in. On the exhale, I'm going to try and pull and push a little bit further. And I'm going to repeat that breathing pattern. Okay, gentle breath in and maintain or pause that position, and then exhale as I move. Okay, now this push-pull mechanism allows me to maintain the position on my rib cage in space versus something like this where I have the left hand on my rib cage and I'm pulling through here. There's a little bit more effort necessary to maintain that position versus when I'm using the wall here now, the right hand here, left hand here. It just allows me to maintain that position of the spine, so I can just hang out in this position and breathe and just gently edge further and further and further into that range of motion, taking nice gentle breaths in, exhale, and rotate further. Okay. We also don't want the pelvis or the femurs to move towards the wall with it, so we want to try and keep the femurs facing forward and maintain that gentle squeeze of the block as we rotate. Again, the key thing here is that pull and push type maneuver. Okay. You could see this as a strategy to rotate the rib cage relative to the scapula as well, because as we rotate, we're pushing through this left humerus and scapula to maintain the scapular position. So essentially we're rotating the rib cage relative to the left scapula. So the left scapula will be protracting in that scenario as the rib cage rotates to the left, versus if I have my hand on my chest and I'm doing a rib pull type position, then that scapula is retracting with the rotation of the rib cage to the left. So something else to consider there. But again, overall, a really easy position to set up for clients at home. Position a chair next to the wall, have something to squeeze, and then they can maneuver the chair further from the wall or closer to the wall to get a little bit more of an aggressive rotation of the thoracic spine.